I don't think you're a proper representation of the masculine black man. You know what I'm saying? I don't think you guys are.
I'm listening.
Okay.
Like, your OG is Wendy Williams.
Today, family, we're doing something a little different. A slow, serious impact of a moment that blew up on the airwaves. The Dame Dash, Charlamagne Tha God exchange that's been trending and sparking debate all over social media. We're going to walk through the controversy, dig into the points Dame Dash made, and then offer a broad perspective on what this is about, and on what this says even about public figures, accountability, and leadership in our community. This is not directed at either Brother Damon Dash, in which I really support what the brother was saying. And this is not to knock Charlamagne Tha God. It is to point out a specific character that is in all of us that we have to shed light on in order for us to fix it. And before I start, family, I'm not here to cheerlead, and I'm not looking for confrontation. In other words, I'm not biased about what I'm about to say to you. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not here to gaslight the facts. I want to give you just context and clarity, and a way to think about what happened, why it mattered, and what we should take from it. Because, we watch it enough to at least get something from it. Let's begin. Here's the short version of it from my platform's perspective. In truth, Dame Dash went on a high-profile radio show and got into a heated back and forth with Charlamagne Tha God, for those of you who don't know. The exchange included sharp accusations about reputation and business claims. A questioning of Charlamagne's masculinity was brought up, some insults and threats, and a larger dispute over who's reporting what and who's entitled to pushback. Pushback when they believe their reputation is being undermined. The clips are out there. Words were said, voices rose, and millions watched. And a lot of people reacted to it. Okay? It's not like it's a hidden subject. It wasn't a whisper in the back room. Okay? It played out in public and on air and then all over social media. But now that we're on the same page about what happened, and if you want to go and view the video, I'll post a link in the comment section. Let me say this up front. I think Dame Dash was defending real concerns about reputation and media narrative. That's what I think. When I watched the video, I also think some lines were even crossed, and that certain things could have been handled more privately. That tension, defend versus de-escalate, is what this whole conversation is about. So let's walk through it. The major points Dame Dash did indeed point out. And I want to expand on each point by point, and you also can leave comments in the comment section if you feel like I left something out. But one of the clearest sparks in the exchange was around an announcement Dame made that he was or would be a chairman for Revolt, or working with them. On air, Charlamagne expressed skepticism, and when Dame Dash pushed back hard and publicly and warned Dame Dad, Charlamagne, not to make up phony sources and claim he'd take legal action if falsehood were spread. That's a pretty aggressive stance. But there's a principle behind reputation that matters. There's a principle behind it. Reputation is the principle, especially when you earn it over decades, over a period of time, and then somebody come in and say something that will tarnish your reputation. Now, reputational capital is one of the few non-renewable currencies people in our culture sphere actually have. When you build a brand, whether it's as a record module or a host, an entrepreneur, an activist, people decide whether to trust you to do business with you or to listen to you based on a combination of past deeds done or deeds not done, public behavior, and present claims. Okay? If a public claim is questioned, for example, are you actually the chairman of Revolt? That question is not neutral. It moves markets, potential partners, and public perception. Now, if the claim is false, if it's a false claim, it can make you look like a liar. You see, if the claim is true and people suggest otherwise, well, it can unfairly damage your influence. It can tarnish your reputation. Dame's reaction to call out the challenge and threaten legal pushback is rooted in that dynamic.
My OG is sitting right here. You see him? Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna tell you why he's my OG. Because he killed anybody or any of those things. He just taught me how to be a better man.
Wendy, not my OG.
Can you
That's
stop?
Funny, though.
Can you stop?
Wendy Williams is your OG.
Wasn't she your boss?
Yeah, at one point.
So
yeah.
she was your OG. She put you on, and you should give her grace, and you should also give her props out of respect.
Oh, I know.
But because we have different trauma, like we're different. Like I'm not the kind of guy that would I'd rather get my ass whipped than run. But you're proud that you ran.
Yeah.
I'd rather get my ass whipped. And it ain't no disrespect, but I kind of think you're gay. You just act a little gay.
You got a problem with gay people?
Not at all. I've got a problem with people that pretend they're not gay. So let me tell you why.
But what if
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why.
This is hilarious. I love
you're
what
gay.
you're doing. This is hilarious.
So what I'm saying is, you might, because you started in gossip, which is is very feminine, and you want people to listen to you, and that we want people that represent masculinity, because men need to be doing what they need to do as men. They don't need to be worried about girl stuff. Do you think he's masculine? Would you want this man around you if 10 guys jumped you? He'd run, and you'd have to run with him. I like my women to feel safe when they're around me. I don't tell people and I'm not saying that's your way, but you're just not masculine. I've seen him run. I looked at a whole reel of, there's like a thing that says how many people bark. There's stuff that how many times you talk about other people's genitals. You real masculine men don't do that. You said that some guys was throwing you kisses because they liked your paws butt, and you went back. That's gay.
Why do you have such a problem with gay?
I don't have a problem. I have a problem with you. Wait. No. Yeah, that is why I pause. There's a lot of people like you.
That's crazy.
There's a lot of people like you that are gay that pretend they're not.
Black men can't be gay.
Black men that are gay should say they're gay.
Well, I'm not gay.
You are. You're gay. Anyway, now let me talk to you.
Broke.
Let me
if I'm gay, you're broke.
Let me say this.
I'm listening.
You acting like a girl.
You move like an old auntie. You an old Harlem auntie.
I could punch you right in your face like a grown man. I won't.
And then we gonna
and
fight.
you won't do shit.
See, Dame, this is with the
That's
chatty
not
patty. So just
now,
so you know, because I knew you was going to say
Nah,
that.
I've seen you run.
Yes.
That's it. I've
was
seen you.
before the guy.
I'm not saying I will. I'm saying no. Then your version of respectful is different than mine.
It was rooted in their dynamic. And from a purely strategic standpoint, There are two legitimate responses when your public claim is attacked. Correct the record privately with the partner. Is that right? The partner that's in question. Or two, correct the record publicly with receipts to protect your stature and prospective deals.
We were on the street right now and you were talking like that, I would have fucked you up. But I'm not going to do that. Nah, I wouldn't have got beat up. But I wouldn't have got beat up. Let's end this. So let me say one more thing before I leave.
I had so many questions.
All right. Oh, you're right.
How you want to leave? You can't get in your emotions and want to leave, Dane.
No, what I'm saying is when you interrupt me and you say certain things, where I'm from, the masculine man will fuck you up.
Yeah,
but because wait, let me finish. No, I didn't. I said
not gonna happen.
I didn't say that. I said I could, and you wouldn't do anything.
And we gonna fight.
I didn't see that on tape. You ran.
Yeah, because it was 4 guys, but that's cool.
Wait, ask what happened when 30 guys jumped me.
Respect.
I got that ass whipping, but I fucked them niggas up.
I think it's been some head trauma ever since.
So it's two ways to look at this, man. And Dame chose the latter in a very public forum. Why? Some of y'all want to know why. Why did he do that? I want to attempt to tell you why he did it. And I feel like you already know. Because in real time, media ecosystems, a retraction or correction buried later won't repair the immediate damage of viral doubt. Do you understand? In other words, when somebody says something like that and they put this rumor out there about you, a silent retreat can be framed as an admission of guilt. So there's logic to his choice. Protect the brand immediately. Threaten legal action to discourage rumor mongering and force the skeptic or the skeptical party to either produce evidence or back down. Be quiet. Stop talking like that. Now, caveats. Threatening legal action on air looks hostile, familiar, but hostile, and escalatory. See? It invites more headlines and a tit for tat kind of dance over the media platforms. And if the claim truly wasn't accurate, the legal threats would start to ring hollow and leave you looking defensive rather than factual. So the smarter move, if you got documents and confirmations on a thing, is to post the receipts in a controlled way or give the other side a short window to correct their own statement. The balance is firmness with dignity. But your content, the content, it matters. Trust me. Those of you who cover topics like this, you truly matter. If you've been undercut repeatedly by journalists, those of you who have been undercut repeatedly by journalists, and these journalists, they treat insinuation as fact, then you can understand why someone would decide to publicly and forcefully contest that kind of narrative. You see? And I think it was a very, very smart move. I think it was a very smart move. You can understand someone who decides to do that. Bottom line, protecting your reputation, protecting your brand is, a defensible motive. It is, because you got to watch what people say, and people should watch what they say. The method and tone matter for how the defense is received. So think about that. Another thread in the exchange, and I'll post it later. Charlamagne leaned into narratives about Dame's financial status. Go back and look at it. You'll see where when Dame pointed out some truths, I feel like brother took a low blow. And Dame called that false and personal. And he pushed back. Dame did, as any man would do, strongly. On-air money allegations are like a direct hit, man, to a legacy built on entrepreneurship, and that's what Dame has always stood for. When someone who made their name as a business founder, an entrepreneur, is publicly labeled as broke, because I know y'all heard that, the label is not only an insult, it's an attempt to erase agency. For artists and executives, family, whose public persona is built on narrative of claiming our scarcity to ownership. Calling them broke is essentially calling their life worth a failure. And I think that's where brother went wrong. That's devastating to both the ego and the brand. Do you understand? So when Charlamagne used that kind of ammunition, whether sarcastically he did it, whether it was for ratings or whether it was rhetorical barbs, Dame's reaction was predictable. He spent years encouraging people to demand ownership. It's on record. To be the CEO of their lives. Dame Dash has been doing this throughout his entire career. For him, being painted as a destitute is painful, man. Yeah. And something to be publicly corrected. I would have publicly corrected him too. But here's the nuance. The public has a right to question claims, accusations, and even some stories, especially when a person or a person's legal or financial record shows troubles. People always question those whom have a criminal past, right? And Dame has had public money disputes and lawsuits in his history. So they frame that and use that against the brother. When skepticism is grounded in verifiable facts, it's a legitimate line of questioning. But when it's launched as a personal attack, I personally don't respect that. And with the aim of humiliating rather than informing, you can understand why the target might be angry. Do you understand? All right, so there's also a broader cultural element to it as well. And for those of you who are not black or who don't live in black communities or who don't know anything about being around black people in the black community, narratives about success and failure are wrapped up in integrational pride. And you know, we have pride. If a high-profile black entrepreneur is dismissed as broke, then you got problems. I got furniture coming, guys. Hold on. I'm doing well, sir. You ready for furniture? Okay. Yes, sir. Have a good day. Julian, let me know when the truck is here with the furniture, okay? Okay, son. So, and a broader cultural element is something that we don't take into consideration. That's why defenses are emotional, family. And you know, they become fierce. Again, the strategy for the personal attack is to either one, provide clarity, show evidence of assets, projects, revenue sources, or two, point out the maliciousness of the attack and demand respect. That's all. Dame chose to demand respect and contest the narrative vocally while he was on live. Whether that was the tactically best move, it's debatable, but it's emotionally coherent. And I think we need to take a look into it. This is the part of the clip, family, that I'm about to talk about. That's real. It got the loudest reaction. It got the loudest reaction. And Dame openly questioned Charlamagne's masculinity. Even suggested he's a little gay. That's what he said. And pointed to a past time Charlamagne fled and attacked as evidence of those claims. Those are sharp, they're painful accusations, and they push buttons about gender, toughness, and honor. I need to handle this real carefully because it touches people's identities and can be weaponized even against me. So let's just be blunt. Accusing someone of lacking masculinity or suggesting they are gay as an insult is a tactic rooted in homophobia and a narrow definition of manhood. It reduces rich human complexity into a binary that has harmed people for generations. Now, truth is truth, and we have to stand on truth. And even if, like he said, if someone happens to be indulging in those activities, then they should come out with it and be clear about it. But we must interpret what Dame was doing, family, in context and not in a vacuum. Okay? All right. From his vantage point, a man who built a persona, okay, on toughness and old school street codes. Everybody know Dame. When it comes to how he delivers himself and how he is perceived. The idea of someone publicly acting in ways he perceives as cowardly, like fleeing trouble, it hits a nerve. He conflates courage with leadership. And it got rough in there. And anything short of that is, to him, disqualifying. So he weaponized sexualized language as shorthand for, you don't embody my version of what a leader should be. In a sense, that's careless and problematic. And it's homophobic on undertone and overtone. Because my teacher is able to call out the truth and the lie without harming the person that's even trying to harm him. And it doesn't make my teacher weak. When he does this, it makes him stronger. So it's also culturally resonant. In many communities, masculinity is still tied up with the idea of standing and facing threats head on, and that cultural expectation frames his rhetoric. I agree. But we can parse his intent without endorsing the tactics, if that makes any sense. If Dame's critique is really about courage, accountability, and standing for your words, then the argument could be made without slurs or orientation-based jabs. Saying, I don't think he demonstrates the courage I expect from someone trying to claim leadership. Well, that would be a clear way to make a simpler point. Instead, by couching the critique in sexualized insult, he reinforced the cultural homophobia that we already going through, that does damage by equating identity with cowardice. And I'm not calling brother a coward. I think he's a very stand-up man. I agree with 99% of what he said based on what I understand about us as a people. Not directing it at Charlamagne, but the character, that kind of spirit exists all around. And he was just calling it out. And I think based on some forms of things that were said about him that could tear his whole legacy, his everything down, I think he made an emotional response. And I don't think he really cared about the effects of that response at that point. Um, you know, if that's Dame's real target, then that problem is valid. It was just poorly expressed in my judgment. Um, Sometimes we confuse tone with substance. Substance. Public figures sometimes dodge consequences and hide behind a lot of controversy. Taking a homophobic jab at somebody is really unacceptable. And it distracts from the underlying concern that us as leaders should have uh, for leadership and accountability. You know, this is the tension I mentioned earlier. Dame said some matters belong behind closed doors, that we should resolve certain issues privately. But he also argued that when something harmful is out in the open, you must publicly call it out. That's right. That's true. That's a pivot worth a long conversation. And I think I want to have it. Think about the difference, family, between a private transgression and a public impact. If two people, okay, have a personal dispute, that doesn't affect others. Taking it behind closed doors is almost always the mature route you want to go. It preserves your dignity. It prevents a public spectacle. And it helps craft a solution without any collateral damage. But when someone is in the public square using their platform in ways to harm people in our community, spreading misinformation or materially damaging people's reputation, that changes the calculus, baby. You're messing with the bag. You're messing with the bag. You got to leave the bag alone. Dame's position reflects a practical binary. Internal issues handled privately, public actions respond publicly. Why is that defensible? Because public accusation is terrible. Public actions influence public opinion. They influence markets and even policy. If a media host uses their show to make baseless claims, which they do, those claims ripple outward. A silent private correction is insufficient to undo the harm that was done. He made a public statement. Dame addressed it publicly. Moreover, some people have historically weaponized private reconciliations as a way to bury inconvenient truths. I'm sure you know about that. For marginalized communities, public accountability sometimes becomes the only way to avoid repeating the harm that was done. Once you do it in the open, it's pretty much done. If you do it right and you're standing on truth, it's done, Jack. That said, there's nuance. If you can de-escalate and secure a private correction that then becomes public, the person who made the error or the erroneous claim issues a broadcast retraction, that's clearer and cleaner and less destructive. Don't you agree? The ideal path to go for me would be to go private first with a clear deadline for correction. And if no correction is forthcoming, well then, make the facts public with receipts. This protects both truth and dignity. Dame's public approach suggests either the private approach was tried and failed, or that he believes private fixes are too slow to fight the spread of false narrative. But there's also a moral dimension to it. See, it's so much that goes into situations like this that we overlook all the time. Yeah, we overlook it all the time, family. You know, public call-outs can become cause for spectacle, and they can escalate and invite dangerous reactions, family. Now, if you choose public correction as the first resort, you risk turning a potentially resolvable problem and dispute into permanent damage. From a community strategy and that kind of perspective, the best practice blends both. You attempt a private resolution first, and if the offended party refuses or doubles down, go public. But have your facts now, and without ad hominem attacks. We don't need you, Dame's rhetoric lean into public defense. Understandable. But the sharper lesson is to use public correction as a tool of last resort, not as a reflex, not as an emotional response. If you agree, man, just hit that like button in the comment section. Because I think Dame made stinging comments about the show itself, the studio, the host, the choices, the sources they use, implying that the interview environment was uninspiring, and it was. I mean, personally, I don't much watch TV, but that's an attack on journalists and their integrity, and it matters both because talk shows are gatekeepers. I'll say it again. Talk shows are gatekeepers. Now, just take a step back. Radio and podcast hosts wield enormous cultural power. Do you agree? They shape narratives, imply voices, and set the frame for how millions of people receive information. And when a host prioritizes buzzy, digs for insults, or relies on rumors without vetting, they reduce the medium to a public spectacle. That's not neutral. It has a consequence. It rewards loudness over facts, and it conditions audiences to expect raw theatrics rather than the responsible truth and true inquiry. Now, Dame's frustration echoes a broader critique of parts of the media that most of us would agree with. Too often, interviews are designed for viral clips. Is that right, content creators? Not nuance, viral clips. A good interview holds figures accountable, but they also ask some hard questions. And these questions come with precision and fairness. They check their facts. They do their research. They don't operate with an assumption-based approach of entertainment first. When a host drops a line like "he's broke" without context or airily suggests a public claim is false without naming the sources, that's sloppy. That's not good. That's bad for business. Because it invites gossip. People are going to be talking about that now. And gossip is corrosive. That's deep, man. Now, radio hosts often claim that their job is to press and to provoke. I've been studying this. To produce content that gets people to talk. That's why you see Nori with, he got the drinks all up there on the top of the table. He gets you drunk first. And he get you to drinking. And while you're drinking, you start talking and saying a lot of stuff that you probably wouldn't ordinarily say. So they're doing this to produce content that gets the people talking. There's a commercial incentive to do that. So the question becomes, what responsibility does the host have to the truth versus the market? There's no easy answer to this. But the healthy media model rewards hosts who can deliver both high ratings and rigorous, accountable interviewing. That's real. So Dame's critique then is a plea for more seriousness better fact checking, and a higher bar for the way public conversations are moderated. I don't think he's asking for too much. Sounds a lot like good media is what he's asking for. Dame said, I could punch you in your face and that's alarming. I know, right? But the user asked me to note that he handled himself very, very, very civilized when it came to that. Because if you listen to what he was saying, he wasn't actually saying he would hit him in his mouth. He was saying, I could hit you in your mouth and you wouldn't do nothing. He was using what he saw on film to defend himself for what he was saying. Do I agree with it? It's not what I would have said, but he was making a point. And his point was well made. So what does that tell us about how anger is expressed in public conflict? How do we reconcile a controlled demeanor with the presence of threats? Think about it. We're not even talking about Dame Dash and Charlamagne. This is going to happen again. This is just one small incident that has happened recently, but it's going to happen again. And what are we going to do? Threatening physical harm on the air is never ideal, and he was not doing it. It escalates conflict. It'll risk real-world spillover and can detract from any legitimate critique you might have because now you're in your feelings. But we should also parse the difference between, the content of a threat and the texture of the performance. Dame's delivery was controlled. He wasn't upset or out of character. His cadence, his posture, and his choice suggested someone who knew how to command a room. I think he used bravado strategically. Sharp words, measured tone, and a posture that told the political masses, I'm not playing with you. That combination can read as, civilized, because it substitutes performative control for uncontrolled rage. Think of it this way. The person who screams is often seen as unhinged, but the person who speaks quietly while applying consequences can feel more threatening. And it's precisely because they look composed. There's an old code back in the days in certain towns and states, cultural millennials, where calm anger is more potent than explosive anger. I'll handle you, but I'll do it in a way that will make you regret it. That's the posture Dame kind of came with. Now, the ethics implied threats and still threats, and they seem as threats, but I told you what I believe he was trying to say. I don't believe brother was threatening him. Even delivered calmly, though, in certain instances, they send the message that disagreement could turn physical, especially when it comes from Black people. And in a public forum, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. It could turn physical, right? That's dangerous. So to defend Dame's civilized bearing is not to accuse the threat. It's just to recognize the skill with which he navigated his compass in a chaotic situation, really, because certain words that were said shouldn't have been said by Charlamagne Tha God in my math. The better rhetoric move, and the one that lands with dignity, is to call out the wrongs, demand accountability, and keep legal pressure or formal complaints as the corrective mechanism rather than veiled violence behind the scenes. See, that preserves credibility and avoids normalizing threats as a corrective tool. Now, I know you didn't expect to hear me talking like this, But we're moving into a couple of theses Dame was talking about. He was staking them out, actually. He wasn't just attacking Charlamagne's performance. He was making a broader argument that people would listen to. And people did listen to. He was making the argument that people who behave like Charlamagne, performative, ratings first, sometimes cowardly in matters, will not give us the leaders we need. That's the most substantial claim, and I want to lay it out very, very carefully. To me, this is the heart of the interview. This is the heart of the interview. This is the heart of the new perspective you asked me to develop. Not that Charlamagne himself is the problem. For those of you who wanted me to talk about this. But that the archetype that he represents, the performative culture personality who trades in provocation, shock, and viral moment making, is not the leadership profile a movement or a community building project should be built around. And I agree. And first, define leadership. And define it in the terms that that matter. Leadership is not just charisma. I know a lot of people with charisma. That don't make them a leader. It's not just being loud or generating clicks, having a lot of followers, subscribers. It's not that. Real leadership involves a vision people can get behind. Expertise or a competence in critical areas that, like finances or policy, strategy, system building, the capacity to take hits and respond with foresight rather than reflex, and an ethic of stewardship for the people you claim that you lead. It's one thing to say you're a leader, and it's another thing to be a leader. It's one thing to be a cultural barometer. It's another thing to actually organize, build institutions, and sustain outcomes across the years. Media personalities whose currency is attention often have incentives. And these incentives conflict with long-term leadership. Their job is to keep the audience engaged, not to lose the audience. Polarizing sound bites and scandals. Come on, man. But institutions, schools, businesses, housing initiatives, real news, real media, local politics, or local political structures require patience, coalition building, and a tolerance for slow, unglamorous work. It's not fun always being a leader. Performative personalities get rewarded for the controversy that they surround their ecosystem around, not for quiet institution building. See, that's structural incentive. Mismatch is important. Look at it. These are two different layouts I'm giving you. That structural incentive mismatch is important. The public role of hosts and influencers is hybridized. It is hybridized. They are part of journalists, part entertainer, part commentator. That hybrid role creates an expectation gap. And I tell you about these gaps all the time. Audiences sometimes misinterpret a showman's bravado as a sign of institutional readiness. and they conflate rhetorical skill with organizational capacity. Dame's critique is that when primarily as gladiators for clicks, we wind up with leadership vacuums. We elevate the loudest voices, man. Great for TV ratings, not necessarily great for city council meetings and school board meetings and cooperative bank joint meetings. Come on. So consider the accountability. A leader should be accountable for something larger than their own persona. That means they must be legible in their values, open about conflicts of interest, and consistent under pressure. Personal theatrics that avoid accountability, pivoting from one viral moment to another without addressing the structural issues behind the moment, that don't build the trust.